Whether you support the death penalty or not, you probably wonder if there were any executions carried out involving people that were in fact innocent. It turns out this did happen on several occasions, and today we're going to talk about some people that were punished for something they didn't do. Cameron Todd Willingham. On December 23, 1991, a fire destroyed the family home of Cameron Todd Willingham in Corsicana, Texas. Killed in the fire were Willingham's 3 daughters, 2-year-old Amber Louise and 1-year-old twins Carmen Diane and Cameron Marie. Willingham himself escaped the home with only minor burns. Stacy, Willingham's then wife and the mother of his 3 daughters, was not home at the time of the fire. She was out shopping for Christmas presents at a thrift shop. Prosecutors said that Willingham set the fire and killed the children in an attempt to cover up the abuse of the girls. However, there was no evidence of child abuse. Stacy told prosecutors that he had never abused the children. "Our kids were spoiled rotten," she said, insisting he would never harm their children. But according to her, she herself was abused by him. Since Willingham's 2004 execution, significant controversy has appeared over the legitimacy of the guilt verdict and the interpretation of the evidence that was used to convict him of arson and murder. In June 2009, the state of Texas ordered a re-examination of the case. In August 2009, 18 years after the fire and 5 years after his execution, a report conducted by Dr. Craig Baylor, hired by the Texas Forensic Science Commission to review the case, stated that a finding of arson could not be sustained. Baylor said key testimony from a fire marshal at Willingham's trial was hardly consistent with a scientific mindset and is more characteristic of mystics of physics. As it turns out, the fire really was accidental. Ruben Cantu. On the 9th of November 8, 1984, at approximately 11:30 p.m., Ruben Cantu, age 17 at the time, and his friend David Garza, 15, broke into a vacant San Antonio house under construction and robbed 2 Hispanic males at gunpoint. The 2 victims, Pedro Gomez, 25 or 35, and Juan Moreno, 19, had been workmen sleeping on floor mattresses at a construction site guarding against burglary, as a water heater had been recently stolen from the work site. The 2 victims were sleeping in their work clothes, with their pockets full of their cash earnings at the time of the robbery. Cantu and Garza were carrying a rifle, which they used to rob the 2 men of their wristwatches. As they tried to take their cash, they were interrupted by Gomez's attempt to retrieve a pistol hidden under his mattress. Gomez was shot at least 9 times by the boys' rifle, dying instantly, and Moreno was also shot as many as 9 times by the same rifle. Thinking they had killed both men, the 2 teens fled the scene. Juan Moreno, however, survived the attack and was able to leave the house and call for help shortly after the event, though he lost 1 lung, 1 kidney, and part of his stomach. Short on leads other than Moreno's description of 2 Latinos aged roughly 14 and 19, a neighborhood officer passed along a rumor from the halls of South San Antonio High School, where Cantu was in 9th grade. A shop teacher reported that 3 kids had been involved in the robbery and murder and that students were saying Cantu had done the killing. Questioned just before his arrest, Garza identified Cantu, saying he saw Ruben come running out of the house, according to a detective's notes. The key trial witness, however, was Juan Moreno, the shooting survivor, who repeatedly identified Ruben Cantu in court. A decade after Cantu was executed, Moreno recanted his story, as did Garza. Cantu's co-defendant later admitted he allowed his friend to be falsely accused. He says Cantu wasn't even there the night of the murder. Shortly after being convicted by a jury of first-degree murder and sentenced, Cantu wrote a note to the people of San Antonio saying, "I have been framed in a capital murder case. I was framed because I shot an off-duty police officer named Joe De La Luz." On August 24, 1993, at 22 minutes after midnight, at the age of 26, Cantu died by lethal injection, becoming the 5th juvenile offender to be executed by Texas. His final request was for a piece of bubblegum, which was denied. Asked if he had a last statement, he said, "No, sir." Larry Griffin. Griffin was put to death in 1995 for the 1981 murder of Quinton Moss, a Missouri drug dealer. Moss was killed in a drive-by shooting while allegedly dealing drugs on a street corner. Griffin always maintained his innocence, and now evidence seems to indicate he was telling the truth. The first police officer on the scene now says the eyewitness account was false, even though the officer supported the claims during the trial. Another eyewitness who was wounded during the attack was never contacted during the trial, and he says Griffin wasn't present at the crime scene that night. Griffin was executed by lethal injection on June 21, 1995. He maintained his innocence right up to the execution. Carlos DeLuna. In 1989, DeLuna was executed for the stabbing of a Texas convenience store clerk. He was charged with the murder of 24-year-old Wanda Lopez on the evening of February 4, 1983, in Corpus Christi, Texas. The young woman died from multiple stab wounds, apparently from a buck knife. Lopez was killed while on the phone with the police, having just called 911 to report a suspicious person who turned out to be her killer. The crime was particularly senseless because, according to the 911 tape, Lopez seemed to be giving her attacker the money at the time she was stabbed, saying, "You want it? I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. I'm not going to do nothing to you. Please." The crime was observed by 2 eyewitnesses. The first, Kevin Baker, had stopped for gas at the Shamrock gas station. At around the same time, John and Julie Arzuaga were pulling into a nearby club when they observed a Hispanic man jogging towards the east away from the Shamrock. The Columbia University team documented numerous discrepancies in the various accounts from police radio alerts, police reports, eyewitnesses, and other bystanders. Baker, who came face-to-face with the attacker after the attack, told police the suspect was wearing a light-colored shirt and dark pants, dressed shabbily, wearing a flannel shirt under a gray sweatshirt. The Arzuagas insisted the man they saw jogging near the store wore a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, untucked, and uniform-type pants. Another witness told police that the man he saw with the knife wore a white shirt, long sleeve, untucked, and dark pants. The Arzuagas told police the subject they saw running was wearing a white long-sleeve shirt, untucked and unbuttoned. The first police radio alert advised of a suspect northbound on foot to the rear of the store. Other people in the area reported to police they had seen a man running northbound. The Arzuagas reported the man they saw was jogging eastward, a few hundred yards east of the store. Baker reported that the suspect had a mustache and approximately 10 days' worth of growth in his beard. The Arzuagas reported that the man they saw jogging from the store was clean-shaven. Almost 20 years later, Chicago Tribune uncovered evidence that shows DeLuna was likely innocent. The evidence showed that actually Carlos Hernandez, who confessed to the murder multiple times, was in fact the one that committed the crime. David Wayne Spence. Spence was put to death in 1997 for the murder of 3 teenagers in Texas. He was supposedly hired by a convenience store clerk to kill someone else, but he allegedly killed the wrong people by mistake. The prosecutors for the state of Texas allegedly withheld evidence presenting a more likely candidate in a murder case leading to the execution of an innocent Waco man. As he was being strapped to the gurney, David Wayne Spence, 40 years old, of Waco, Texas, turned to his victims' families and maintained his innocence in his last words. "First of all, I want you to understand I speak the truth when I say I didn't kill anyone," Spence said. "Honestly, I have not killed anyone. I wish you could get the rage from your heart and you could see the truth and get rid of the hatred." The supervising police lieutenant said, "I do not think David Spence committed this crime." The lead homicide detective agreed, saying, "My opinion is that David Spence was innocent. Nothing from the investigation ever led us to any evidence that he was involved." Jesse Tafero. In 1976, he was convicted of murder and executed via electric chair in the U.S. state of Florida for the murders of 39-year-old Florida Highway Patrol Officer Philip A. Black and 39-year-old Ontario Provincial Police Caporal Donald Irwin. The officers were killed during a traffic stop where Tafero, his wife Sunny Jacobs, and their children were passengers. He and Jacobs were both sentenced to death for the crime. The main evidence used to convict them was testimony by someone else who was involved in the crime, ex-convict Walter Rhodes. Rhodes gave his testimony in exchange for a life sentence. Tafero was to be executed by electrocution. The machine, called Old Sparky, malfunctioned, causing 6-inch flames to shoot out of Tafero's head. A member of the execution team had used a synthetic sponge rather than a sea sponge, which is necessary to provide greater conductivity and a quick death. In all, 3 jolts of electricity were required to execute Tafero, a process that took 7 minutes. Prison inmates later claimed that Old Sparky was fixed and tampered with to make Tafero's execution more like torture. One close inmate friend of Tafero later said he could smell the burning flesh of his friend for days after. It has been rumored that Tafero's death served as inspiration for author Stephen King when he wrote the execution of Edward Delacroix in his novel The Green Mile. 2 years later, his companion, Jacobs, was released due to the lack of evidence, the same evidence that caused Tafero's death. Thomas Griffin and Meeks Griffin. This case dates back to 1915. The Griffin brothers, 2 black men, were convicted of the murder of a white man. The reason they were convicted is because Monk Stevenson, another black man suspected of committing the murder, pointed to the brothers as having been responsible. He later admitted the reason he blamed them is because they were wealthy and he assumed they had the money to beat the charges. The Griffin brothers were completely innocent, but they were put to death nonetheless. Their case was dramatized in the 2021 supernatural horror film Blackstock Boneyard. In this film, they returned from the grave 100 years later to take revenge on the descendants of the people responsible for their deaths. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel for more content related to true crime, mysteries, and death row. My goal is to reach 100 subscribers by the end of 2022. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.